The docking clamps released with a pneumatic hiss that echoed through the observation deck of New Avalon Station. Jace Rowan pressed his palm against the viewport, watching another diplomatic shuttle glide toward the Lithari dreadnought, hanging in the void like a crystalline cathedral. The sight still made his chest tighten, even after 6 months of these so-called peace negotiations. "Beautiful ships," muttered the dock worker beside him, a grizzled woman with cybernetic arms. "Shame about the people flying them." Jace kept his mouth shut. He'd learned that lesson the hard way during his years as a search and rescue pilot. Politics got people killed. His job was to fly, find survivors, and bring them home. Or at least, it had been until the funding dried up and left him staring at a mountain of debt and a sister's grave he couldn't afford to maintain. The crowd on the observation deck had swelled since morning. Half wore the blue armbands of the Peace Coalition, waving holographic banners that read, "One Galaxy, One Family," in both human and Lithari script. The other half sported red bands, their signs considerably less diplomatic. "Remember Titan Colony" was the tamest among them. Jace shouldered through the crowd toward the employment kiosks. The Covenant of Kinship signing ceremony was scheduled for next week, which meant every diplomatic mission, cargo run, and escort job would pay triple rates. He needed just one good contract, one decent payday to keep the creditors off his back while he continued his real work, finding out who had rerouted the shipping lanes the night his sister Sarah died. The employment hub buzzed with activity. Pilots, mechanics, translators, all hoping to cash in on the diplomatic gold rush. Jace scanned the job boards, his augmented contact lenses filtering for pilot positions. Most were already taken. The few remaining required security clearances he'd lost when he'd started asking inconvenient questions about Director Calder Miles and his emergency coordination office. Then he saw it. A single posting, highlighted in diplomatic purple. "Experienced pilot required for Lithari ceremonial flight. Neural link compatibility essential. Immediate start. Apply in person. Docking Bay 47. The pay rate made him blink twice. It was enough to cover 3 months of expenses. Maybe 4 if he stretched it. Enough time to finally access those classified shipping records through back channels. Jace checked the time. The posting had been up for less than 5 minutes. He ran. Docking Bay 47 sat on the station's diplomatic wing, past 3 security checkpoints, and a small army of reporters trying to catch glimpses of the alien delegations. Jace's old rescue credentials still carried enough weight to get him through, though the guards gave him suspicious looks. A washed-up rescue pilot had no business in the diplomatic quarter. The bay itself was smaller than he'd expected, occupied by a single ship that made him stop in his tracks. It wasn't the angular, utilitarian design favored by human engineers, or the organic curves typical of Lithari vessels. This was something in between, a fusion of aesthetics that somehow worked. The hull shimmered with an opalescent sheen that shifted from sea green to sky blue as he moved. "You're early." The voice came from behind the ship's landing strut. A woman emerged, and Jace found himself reassessing every assumption he'd made about Lithari physiology. She looked almost human, if humans came with eyes that shifted from amber to gold depending on the light and hair that moved like it was underwater, even in standard atmosphere. She wore a flight suit that seemed to be cut from liquid metal, form-fitting but somehow modest, with elaborate symbols etched along the sleeves. "Most humans take at least 10 minutes to find this bay," she continued, studying him with those unsettling eyes. "The station's navigation system has quirks." "I've flown rescue operations out of New Avalon for 8 years," Jace replied. "I know every shortcut, dead end, and maintenance tunnel in this place." "Jace Rowan." She said his name like she was tasting it. "Former Lieutenant Commander, Search and Rescue Division. 87 successful extractions, including the Prometheus Station incident. Resigned following personal tragedy." He stiffened. "My records are sealed." "To humans, perhaps. She tilted her head, a gesture that was almost bird-like. I am Seraphine Kale, of the Kale dynasty, third heir to the tidal throne. The media calls me the Princess of Fire and Seas, though something always gets lost in translation. And you need a pilot. I need a very specific pilot. She walked around him slowly, like a buyer inspecting merchandise. The coronation flight isn't merely ceremonial. It requires someone who can interface with both human and Lethari navigation systems, who can think in three-dimensional oceanic terms rather than the linear void paths your kind prefer, and most importantly, someone who won't ask inconvenient questions. I'm good at not asking questions. Liar, she smiled, showing teeth that were just slightly too sharp to be human. You've been asking questions about Director Miles for 6 months. You've been trying to access classified shipping data. You believe he was responsible for your sister's death. Jace's hand moved instinctively toward the concealed pistol at his hip, then stopped. If she wanted him dead, she wouldn't have brought him here. What do you want? I want to complete the coronation flight. I want to deliver the seed of kinship to the Shrine of Tides. I want this peace treaty to succeed. She paused. And I want a pilot who has personal reasons to see certain human officials exposed for what they are. You're saying, Miles? I'm saying nothing. I'm offering you a job. The flight leaves in 6 hours. You'll need to undergo neural calibration, sign the standard contracts, and prepare for a journey that will either cement peace between our species or destroy any chance of it. She held out a datapad. Interested? Jace took the pad, scrolling through the contract. Most of it was standard pilot boilerplate, liability waivers, confidentiality agreements. The pay was even better than advertised, with bonuses for successful completion. His eyes caught on one section near the end, but the text was blurred, pixelated. Power surge in the diplomatic wing last night, Seraphine explained. The printer's been malfunctioning. That section just covers cultural integration protocols. Nothing significant. He should have read it more carefully. Should have demanded a clean copy. Should have done a lot of things differently. But Sarah's grave marker was scheduled for removal in 2 weeks if he couldn't pay. And this contract would buy him the time he needed. Jace pressed his thumb to the biometric scanner. Excellent. Seraphine's smile widened. Now, let's discuss the neural link procedure. Have you ever synchronized with a Lethari consciousness before? Is that a euphemism? If only it were that simple. She led him toward the ship. Your people install neural interfaces for piloting. Yes, crude but functional. Our method is more intimate. The pilot and navigator must achieve perfect synchronization, sharing not just data but instinct, reflex, even emotion at times. Sounds invasive. It's necessary. The coronation flight path passes through regions of space where your instruments will fail. Only combined human Lethari perception can navigate the tidal streams between stars. She paused at the ship's entrance. There is one more thing. The synchronization requires a physical anchor, a focal point for the neural connection. She reached into a compartment beside the hatch and withdrew a small box. Inside lay a ring, or something like one. It seemed to be made of living metal, shifting and flowing even as he watched. Symbols appeared and disappeared on its surface like writing in water. This is a bio-neural interface ring, Seraphine explained. It will bind to your nervous system, creating a bridge between us during flight. You'll wear it on your dominant hand, integrated with the ship's control systems. Jace had seen neural interfaces before, had one himself implanted behind his right ear. But this was different. The ring seemed alive, aware, waiting. Is it safe? Define safe. She met his gaze directly. It won't harm you. It won't control you. It will, however, create a connection between us that goes beyond mere data transfer. Some find it unsettling. And if I refuse, then I find another pilot, and you find another way to pay for your sister's memorial. She didn't say it cruelly, Just matter-of-factly. Jace appreciated the honesty. He held out his right hand. Let's get this over with. The ceremony, such as it was, took place in the ship's cockpit. Seraphine guided him to the pilot's seat, a hybrid construction that accommodated both human and Lethari physiology. The controls were familiar enough, though overlaid with symbols he couldn't read. First, the calibration. She took the ring from its box, cradling it in both hands. I need your permission to proceed. The ring won't bind without mutual consent.
You have it.
Say it aloud. Words have power in our culture. Jace felt faintly ridiculous, but complied. I give my permission for the neural binding. Seraphine spoke in her own language, the words flowing like water over stones. The ring began to glow, pulsing with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. She held it out, and he slipped it onto his right index finger. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. Not pain, exactly, but a presence in his mind that hadn't been there before. He could feel Seraphine at the edges of his consciousness. Her thoughts, a whisper he couldn't quite understand. The ring adjusted itself, shrinking to fit perfectly, the metal warm against his skin.
Integration successful,
Seraphine said, though her voice sounded strained.
The connection will strengthen during flight. For now, try to...
She was interrupted by an alarm. Not the standard station alert, but something higher pitched, more urgent. The cockpit's displays lit up with warnings in multiple languages.
What's happening?
Jace struggled to focus through the new sensations in his mind. Seraphine was already moving, her fingers flying over the Lethari controls. Someone's broadcasting on the diplomatic emergency channel. Her face paled, the gold draining from her eyes until they were almost white. They're announcing our union. Our what? She turned to him, and through their new connection, he felt her genuine shock and growing anger. The binding ceremony? Someone recorded it. They're broadcasting that the Lethari heir has just entered into a ceremonial marriage with a human pilot. Jace looked down at the ring, which now pulsed with a satisfied warmth. The blurred section of the contract suddenly made horrible sense. You said it was a neural interface.
It is.
Her voice was carefully controlled. It's also a joining band. In our culture, the neural synchronization between pilot and heir is traditionally intimate. The ring recognizes the bond and formalizes it. You're telling me I just married you? According to Lethari law, yes. According to the Covenant of Kinship Protocols, also yes. According to whoever is broadcasting this across every news channel from here to Earth. She pulled up a display showing news feeds already exploding with headlines. Very publicly, yes. Jace slumped in the pilot's seat. He'd wanted to avoid politics, keep his head down, find his sister's killer. Instead, he'd just become the center of the biggest diplomatic incident in human history. Can we undo it? Not without causing a catastrophic loss of faith in the peace process. The joining band doesn't activate unless both parties truly consent. If we claim it was a mistake, it implies either I trapped you or you're lying. Either way, the treaty dies. So we're stuck. For now. She moved to the navigator's position, her movements sharp with suppressed emotion. We can discuss annulment procedures after the coronation flight. The journey to the Shrine of Tides takes 18 hours. We deliver the seed, complete the ceremony, then quietly dissolve this misunderstanding. The comm system crackled to life. Attention Docking Bay 47. By order of Director Miles and the Emergency Security Protocol. All diplomatic flights are suspended pending review. Stand down and prepare for inspection. Seraphine hissed something in her own language that didn't need translation. They're using this as an excuse. Miles has been looking for any reason to delay the treaty. Can he do that? Legally, it's questionable. Practically, he commands station security. She turned to face him, and through their connection, he felt her resolve harden like steel. Unless we launch now, That's theft of a diplomatic vessel, kidnapping of foreign royalty, and about 12 other crimes I can think of.
Only if you're kidnapping me. As my husband, you have co-authority over this vessel. And as the Letheri heir, I have diplomatic immunity that extends to my immediate family. She managed a wry smile. Which now includes you.
Jace could hear security forces approaching, their bootsteps echoing through the bay. In a few minutes, they'd be surrounded, the flight canceled, the peace treaty potentially derailed, all because he hadn't read the fine print. But through the ring, through their new connection, he felt something else. Seraphine's genuine desire for peace, her frustration with the warmongers on both sides, and, underneath it all, a deep sadness she kept carefully hidden. She'd lost people in this war too. You know what? Jace settled into the pilot's seat, hands finding the controls with practiced ease. I've been married for all of 5 minutes and my wife already wants me to steal a spaceship and run from the law. My mother would be so proud. Seraphine's laugh was surprised and genuine. She sounds like an interesting woman.
You have no idea.
He began the startup sequence, feeling the ship respond to his touch. Through the ring, he could sense Seraphine's consciousness meshing with his, her knowledge of the vessel flowing into his mind. Hang on, Your Highness. This is going to be a bumpy divorce. The launch sequence engaged with a harmonious thrum that resonated through both the ship and Jace's bones. Through the neural link, he felt Seraphine's consciousness overlay his own, her knowledge of Lethari flight systems merging seamlessly with his human training. It was like suddenly remembering skills he'd never learned. Security forces are overriding the bay doors, Seraphine reported, her fingers dancing over holographic controls that sprouted from the navigator's console like luminous flowers.
They're trying to lock us in.
Let them try. Jace's hands moved with newfound precision, the ring pulsing warmth with each command. The ship's hybrid engines responded instantly, generating a harmonic frequency that made the entire docking bay vibrate. Your people build beautiful ships, but they didn't design these docking clamps. He pushed more power to the ventral thrusters. The clamps, designed for human vessels with human stress tolerances, began to groan under the strain. Through the cockpit's transparent dome, he could see security personnel scrambling back from the landing pad as hairline cracks appeared in the deck plating.
Warning shot incoming,
Seraphine said calmly.
Electromagnetic pulse, meant to disable our systems.
Can the ship handle it? The Sea Sky has weathered solar storms in the Maelstrom Nebula. A station-based EMP is barely a whisper. She paused, though it will dramatically announce our departure. The pulse hit just as the docking clamps failed. Blue-white energy cascaded over the ship's hull, dancing along its opalescent surface like captured lightning. Every display in the docking bay went dark, emergency lights flickering to life a moment later. In that chaos of shadows and sparks, the Sea Sky lifted off, graceful as its namesake. Jace threaded the ship between the bay doors, just as they began to close, the hull clearing with mere inches to spare. Behind them, he could hear proximity alarms wailing, security channels exploding with chatter. They'd done it. They'd actually done it.
Setting course for the Shrine of Tides?
Seraphine began, then stopped. Her face went pale. We have a problem. The main display lit up with a familiar face. Director Calder Miles looked exactly as he had in every news broadcast for the past 5 years. Steel gray hair cut with military precision. Eyes like chips of winter ice. A smile that never quite reached those eyes. He wore the black uniform of the Emergency Coordination Office. Every medal and rank insignia polished to perfection. Captain Rowan, Miles said, his voice carrying that particular tone of disappointed authority that made even innocent people feel guilty. I must say, I'm surprised. Your record suggested a man who followed orders. My records from when the orders made sense, Jace replied, keeping his hands steady on the controls. They were approaching the station's outer perimeter, where the real challenge would begin. And does this make sense? Stealing a diplomatic vessel? Kidnapping Lethari royalty? I haven't kidnapped anyone. Seraphine leaned into the video pickup's range. Captain Rowan is my chosen pilot, and according to both human and Lethari law, my husband. He has every right to be aboard this vessel. Miles' expression didn't change, but Jace caught the slight tightening around his eyes. The director hadn't expected Seraphine to confirm the marriage so readily. A marriage that was clearly conducted under false pretenses. Miles continued smoothly. Captain Rowan couldn't possibly have understood the full implications of Lethari bonding customs. We're prepared to offer full diplomatic protection while this misunderstanding is resolved. How generous! Seraphine's voice dripped sarcasm. And I suppose this protection would involve indefinite detention while you investigate. Perhaps discovering some convenient evidence that the joining was coerced. I'm simply concerned for the well-being of all parties involved. Bullshit. The word came out before Jace could stop it. Through the neural link, he felt Seraphine's surprise and something that might have been approval. You've been sabotaging the peace process for months. Every delay, every additional security protocol, every leaked document that makes the Lethari look like threats. This is just your latest excuse. Miles's smile widened, showing too many teeth. Careful, Captain. Your conspiracy theories are showing, though I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. Given your recent inquiries into classified shipping data, still trying to blame others for your sister's unfortunate accident. The ring on Jace's finger flared hot. Through their connection, Seraphine felt the spike of rage and grief that shot through him. Her hand moved to rest on his shoulder, a gesture of support that helped him regain control. This conversation is over, Seraphine stated. We will proceed with the coronation flight as scheduled. Any attempt to interfere with a sacred Lethari ceremony will be considered an act of war, and any unauthorized departure from New Avalon space will be considered an act of terrorism. Miles' facade finally cracked, revealing the cold fury beneath. You have 30 seconds to return to the station before I authorize deadly force. The transmission cut off. Immediately, proximity alerts began screaming. 3 patrol craft were moving to intercept, their weapon systems already hot. Can we outrun them? Jace asked, calculating distances and velocities in his head. In open space easily. But first we need to reach the transit threshold. Seraphine's fingers flew over her controls. There's another problem. The refueling station for the ceremonial route has gone dark. Someone sabotaged it 20 minutes ago. Miles. Or Archivist Threx. He's been rallying the traditionalist faction against the treaty. A failed coronation flight would serve both their purposes. She pulled up a star chart, highlighting their route. Without that station, we don't have enough fuel to reach the shrine through normal space. What about abnormal space? She turned to look at him, those color-shifting eyes wide. You're not serious. I have no idea what I'm suggesting, but you're thinking something. I can feel it through this thing. He tapped the ring. Something about water. The tide roads, she said slowly. Ancient navigation paths through folded space-time. My people used them before we developed standard FTL, but they're dangerous, unpredictable. The mathematics involved. Can you calculate them? Yes, but then we use them. The first warning shot streaked past the cockpit, crimson lances of coherent light. Unless you have a better idea. Seraphine was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Link deeper with me. I'll need to share the mathematical framework directly. Your mind will interpret it as, well, I'm not sure. Every species processes the tide roads differently. Jace felt her consciousness press closer against his own. It was like drowning in warm water, except he could breathe. Numbers and equations flowed between them, But his mind translated them into something else entirely: currents and eddies. The push and pull of invisible tides between stars.
"Oh," he breathed. "It's not space, it's an ocean."
"Now you understand." Seraphine's mental voice carried a note of wonder. "Your people see the void as empty, something to push through. We see it as full, something to flow with." The patrol craft were closing, their targeting systems trying to lock on. But the sea sky moved like its namesake, diving and rolling through trajectories that should have been impossible. Jace wasn't flying anymore. He was swimming, riding currents only he and Seraphine could see. There. She highlighted a point in space that looked empty to regular sensors. The tide pool, a point where the roads converge. Jace aimed for it, trusting instincts that weren't entirely his own. The patrol craft followed, their pilots probably wondering why he was flying toward empty space. The lead ship's commander opened a channel. "Captain Rowan, this is your final warning. Stand down or be destroyed." Seraphine.
"Almost there. The calculations need to be perfect or we'll be torn apart by gravitational shears."
More warning shots, closer this time. One clipped their starboard shield, sending tremors through the hull. The ring pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, with Seraphine's heartbeat, with the ship's systems. Everything synchronized. "Now!" Seraphine shouted. Jace triggered the transition. Reality folded. The universe turned inside out. Stars became droplets of light in an infinite ocean. The patrol craft, the station, even the concept of distance itself, dissolved into something far more fundamental. They were riding a wave between waves, surfing probability itself. Through their link, Jace felt Seraphine's exhilaration. This was how her people truly flew, not through space but with it. The sea sky responded to their joined consciousness, its hybrid design finally making sense. It wasn't a fusion of human and Letheri technology. It was a translation, letting each species' perception enhance the other. "How long can we maintain this?" Jace asked, his voice sounding strange in the fluid space of the tide roads. "Normally minutes. With our link," she smiled, and he felt it more than saw it. "Let's find out." They flew, swam, sailed through the cosmic ocean for what felt like hours, but registered as seconds on the chronometer. Jace began to understand the mathematics intuitively, seeing how stellar masses created whirlpools and eddies, how dark matter formed vast underwater mountain ranges that had to be navigated carefully. "We're approaching the first transition point," Seraphine announced. "We'll need to surface briefly to recalibrate." The return to normal space was jarring, like breaking through the surface after a deep dive. Stars snapped back into fixed positions. The sea sky shuddered as its systems readjusted to conventional physics. They'd emerged near a navigation beacon, one of thousands that marked safe routes through human space. It should have been a quiet spot to catch their breath. Instead, they found chaos. "What is that?" Jace stared at the monstrosity hanging in space before them. It had started as a standard mining vessel, but someone had transformed it into a weapon. Crude plasma cannons jutted from its hull like thorns. Religious symbols were burned into its armor plating. "Threx's followers," Seraphine said grimly. "The purifiers. They must have been waiting at every possible transition point." The bastardized mining ship was already turning toward them, weapons charging. Behind it, two more ships emerged from behind a nearby asteroid. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and their fuel reserves were still critical.
"Incoming transmission,"
Seraphine reported. The screen filled with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and disappointment. Archivist Threx wore the ceremonial robes of his office, but he'd added armor plating and weapon bandoliers, turning religious vestments into battle gear. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, giving him a squat, powerful build that radiated physical threat even through a video link. "Apostate," he said, focusing on Seraphine. "You dare corrupt our sacred bloodlines with this mingling?" I follow the old ways more truly than you, Threx, Seraphine replied. The first joining between our species was born from rescue and compassion, not politics or purity. Lies to justify your perversion. His attention shifted to Jace. And you, human, you think that ring makes you one of us? You're nothing but a parasite, feeding on our culture. Actually, Jace said conversationally, I think it makes me your princess's husband, which, according to your own laws, makes me family. Isn't attacking family members considered the highest form of blasphemy in your culture? Threx's face darkened to a shade that probably wasn't healthy for his species. You dare quote our laws? My wife's been sharing neural link. Very educational. He was already plotting escape vectors, but none looked promising. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to let us pass. We're going to complete the coronation flight, and everyone goes home happy. Or I demonstrate why human pilots have a reputation for creative insanity. Through the link, he felt Seraphine's alarm. Jace, what are you planning? Trust me. Then, to Threx, you've got 10 seconds to decide. The archivist laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Empty threats from a failed rescue pilot. Destroy them, but preserve the seed. It can still serve our purposes. The three ships opened fire simultaneously. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds filled space around the sea sky. Jace rolled the ship hard, diving back toward the transition point they'd just exited. We can't go back, Seraphine shouted. The tide roads don't work that way. We're not going back. We're going through. He pushed all available power to the engines. Remember what you said about gravitational shears. Understanding flooded through their link, followed immediately by terror. That's suicide. Only probably. The sea sky shook as rounds impacted its shields. Can you calculate a partial transition, just enough to slip between dimensions without fully entering the roads? It's never been done. First time for everything. She was already working, her consciousness meshing with his as they pushed the ship's hybrid systems beyond their design limits. The ring burned on his finger, the neural load threatening to overwhelm them both. Behind them, Threx's ships closed in for the kill. Now, they said in unison. The sea sky didn't enter the tide roads. Instead, it skimmed along their surface, existing in two states simultaneously. To the purifier ships, it must have looked like their target was having a seizure, flickering in and out of existence. Impossible to track or target. Jace flew by pure instinct, feeling the currents of space-time, the way a surfer feels waves. One wrong move would tear them apart at the molecular level. But he'd spent years threading damaged ships through debris fields, racing against decompression to reach survivors. This was just another impossible situation, requiring an impossible solution. They burst back into normal space on the far side of the purifier formation. Threx's ships were still firing at where they'd been, their sensors unable to process what had just happened. The fuel station, Seraphine gasped, her mental presence flickering with exhaustion. It should be just ahead. It was, or what was left of it. The automated facility had been thoroughly destroyed, its fuel reserves venting into space like lifeblood. But Jace had salvaged enough wrecks to know that destruction was rarely complete. Can you handle the ship for a few minutes? He asked. What are you doing? What I do best. Salvage and rescue. He was already unbuckling from the pilot's seat. The emergency reserves are kept in hardened bunkers, if even one survived. The purifiers will be here in minutes. Then I'll work fast. He made his way to the airlock, muscle memory guiding him into an EVA suit. Through the ring, he could still feel Seraphine's presence, her worry mixing with admiration. The destroyed station was a graveyard of twisted metal and frozen gases. Jace pushed off from the sea sky's hull, micro-thrusters carrying him toward what had been the station's core. His rescue experience served him well. He knew how structures failed, where the strongest points would be. There, a reinforced bunker, cracked but not breached. The emergency fuel reserves. Enough to reach the shrine if they were careful. He mag-locked himself to the bunker and began the delicate process of transferring fuel to the C-Sky's extended collection arm. Through the neural link, he felt Seraphine's tension spike.
"They've found us. 60 seconds out."
40 seconds to complete transfer.
"Jace." "I know."
He worked with practiced efficiency, coaxing the damaged systems to release their precious cargo. The fuel flowed, too slowly, always too slowly. In the distance, he could see the light of approaching engines. Got it. The last of the fuel secured, he pushed off hard toward the ship. Get us ready to dive. Already calculated. Seraphine brought the ship around, the cargo bay opening to receive him. 20 seconds. He almost made it cleanly. Then the first plasma bolt struck the station's wreckage, sending debris spinning in all directions. A piece of shrapnel, no bigger than his fist, punched through his suit's leg section. The suit's emergency systems engaged immediately, sealing the breach, but not before he felt the cold kiss of vacuum. Warning lights cascaded across his helmet display. Mobility compromised. Oxygen reserve damaged. Estimated suit integrity 12 minutes. Jace, through the link. He felt Seraphine's anguish as if it were his own. "I'm fine," he lied, hitting the bay with enough force to crack a rib. "Go." She didn't argue. The bay doors sealed as the C-Sky accelerated, diving once more into the impossible space between spaces. The tide roads embraced them like old friends, carrying them away from Threx's fury and toward their destination. Only then did Jace allow himself to feel the pain. The shrapnel had done more than breach his suit. It had torn through flesh and possibly nicked an artery. The suit's medical systems were working overtime, applying pressure and synthetic coagulants, but they were designed for minor injuries, not this. "You're hurt." Seraphine's mental voice was carefully controlled.
"How bad?"
"Bad enough." He made his way to the cockpit, leaving a trail of blood droplets that sparkled in the artificial gravity. "But we've got bigger problems. My suit's compromised, and we'll need to surface from the roads at least twice more before we reach the shrine. There are emergency suits, not rated for tide road transitions. The dimensional stress would turn them into Swiss cheese." He settled into the pilot's seat, immediately feeling better as their connection strengthened. "How long to the shrine?" 6 hours at optimal speed. She paused. "Your suit has 12 minutes of integrity. Then we'll have to get creative." Through their link, he showed her what he was thinking. It was insane, probably impossible, and their only chance. "You want to merge our life support systems," she said slowly. "Use the neural link to share biological functions. You said the joining band creates a connection beyond data transfer. Let's find out how far beyond." She turned to face him fully, those impossible eyes reflecting every color at once. "It could kill us both. Or it could save us both." He managed to smile despite the pain. "Besides, we're already married. Sharing life support is practically traditional." "Despite everything." She laughed. It was a sound like water over stones, like wind through chimes, like nothing he'd ever heard before. Through their link, he felt the moment she made her decision. "Give me your hand," she said. "The one with the ring." He did. She placed her own hand over his, and spoke words in her own language that the neural link couldn't quite translate. Something about tides and time, about bonds that transcended flesh. The ring flared with light that seemed to come from within. The boundaries between them, already blurred by the neural link, began to dissolve entirely. He felt his breathing sync with hers, his heartbeat align with her dual-chambered rhythm. The pain in his leg faded as her enhanced healing factors kicked in. But it went deeper than the physical. Memories, not his own, flickered through his consciousness. A young girl standing before the tidal throne, swearing to serve her people. A woman watching human ships burn in the void, weeping for the waste of it all. A princess choosing to risk everything for peace, knowing her own kind would call her traitor.
And she saw him in return. The boy who'd grown up in the shadow of Earth's orbital shipyards, dreaming of the stars. The rescue pilot pulling survivors from burning wrecks, each save a small victory against the dark. The brother cradling his sister's body, swearing vengeance on those responsible.
"Oh," Seraphine whispered, and he wasn't sure if she spoke aloud or in his mind. "You're not just seeking revenge, you're seeking justice." Sarah believed in the peace process, Jace heard himself say. She was working on something, a way to verify shipping lane data independently. Then her transport was rerouted into a meteor storm. Miles' office handled the investigation, declared it an accident, case closed.
"And you've been trying to access the real data ever since."
Her mental presence wrapped around him like warmth. "I can help. After the coronation, I'll have full diplomatic access. We can find the truth together." "Together," he repeated, tasting the word. It felt strange. He'd been alone since Sarah died, focused only on his mission. Now, suddenly he wasn't. An alert chimed. They were approaching the next transition point, where they'd have to surface into normal space to recalibrate. It would be dangerous. Threx's people might be waiting. But they had no choice. "Ready?" Seraphine asked. "Ready." They surfaced into a war zone. The transition from the tide roads to normal space felt like being thrown through stained glass. Jace's vision fractured into prismatic shards before snapping back together, revealing a scene from humanity's darkest nightmares. Two fleets faced each other across a debris field that had once been a civilian way station. Human destroyers bristled with weapons on one side. Lithari war vessels hung like predatory crystals on the other. And they were emerging directly between them. Full, evasive, Jace and Seraphine shouted simultaneously, their merged consciousness reacting faster than either could have alone. The sea sky rolled hard to starboard, just as targeting lasers from both fleets painted their hull.
"Unknown vessel. Identify yourself immediately."
The voice crackled through multiple channels, human military crisp overlaying Lithari harmonic tones. "This is Seraphine Kale aboard the Sea Sky," she transmitted on all frequencies. "We are on a diplomatic mission. Do not fire." The response was immediate and contradictory. The human fleet commander, a woman whose face appeared on screen, bearing the scars of too many battles, spoke first. "Princess Kale, we've been ordered to escort you back to New Avalon for your protection." Before Seraphine could respond, the Lithari fleetmaster cut in. "Air Seraphine, you will surrender yourself for purification. Your contamination cannot be allowed to reach the shrine." Contamination. Jace felt anger spike through their shared connection, unsure if it originated from him or Seraphine. "She's trying to save both our species." The human speaks. The Lithari commander's harmonics turned discordant with disgust. "You see how the corruption spreads. She allows her pet to use our communication channels as if he were a person of standing." Through the neural link, Jace felt Seraphine's fury like a physical force. When she spoke, her voice carried undertones that made the translation software screech in protest. "Captain Jace Rowan is my chosen companion, joined by band and blood. Any insult to him is an insult to the Kale dynasty itself. Your dynasty ends with you. Apostate." The Lithari war vessels began to shift formation, their crystalline hulls refracting light into weapon-ready patterns. "We will take the seed and complete a proper coronation with a pure heir." "Over my dead body," the human commander interjected. "That artifact is designated as joint cultural heritage under the preliminary treaty. Any attempt to seize it is an act of war." Jace watched the tactical display with growing horror. Weapons were charging on both sides. In minutes, maybe less. This standoff would become a bloodbath. The peace treaty would die here, along with possibly thousands of souls. "Seraphine," he said through their link. Remember what you said about the tide roads not working backwards?
Yes.
What about sideways? She caught his meaning instantly. It's theoretically possible, but the calculations...
Are you a princess or a scholar?
Both, she said, and he felt her smile through their connection. Transmitting on all channels. This is your final warning. The sea sky will complete its mission. Any interference will be met with creative navigation. Before either fleet could respond, Jace plunged them back into the tide roads. But instead of following the current toward their destination, he turned perpendicular to the flow. The ship screamed in protest, reality bending around them like taffy. Through the ring, he felt Seraphine's mathematical genius working overtime, calculating probability curves that shouldn't exist. They emerged 30 kilometers from where they'd entered, behind the human fleet's formation. Without pausing, Jace dove again. This time, angling through dimensions that made his teeth ache. They surfaced within the Litheri formation, close enough to see individual faces through the crystalline hulls, then vanished again before weapons could track.
What are they doing?
The human commander's voice carried across the chaos.
Showing off,
Jace gasped, blood running from his nose as the strain of repeated transitions hit.
Making a point.
They emerged again, this time directly between the two flagships. Seraphine opened a channel, her voice carrying the authority of millennia of royal breeding. We are demonstrating a new form of navigation, made possible only by human Lithari cooperation. This is the future we offer. Stand down or be left behind. For a moment that stretched like eternity, nobody moved. Then, from the human fleet, a single ship lowered its weapons, then another, like dominoes falling. The demonstration of unified possibility overcame fear and prejudice, if only temporarily. The Lithari fleetmaster was the last to yield, his harmonics grudging. You may proceed, Heir Seraphine, but know that Archivist Threx has placed a sacred bounty on your corruption. Others will come.
Let them, she said simply. We'll be waiting.
They ran. The sea sky dove back into the tide roads, leaving the fleets to their standoff. Jace felt the drain more acutely now, their shared life support taxing both their systems. His leg had stopped bleeding, but the pain had spread, nerve damage making his entire left side feel like static.
3 more hours,
Seraphine said softly.
Can you make it?
Do I have a choice? He managed a weak laugh.
Besides, I've had worse honeymoons.
You've been married before. No, but I've heard stories. At least no one's thrown dishes yet. Her laugh rippled through their connection like healing water. For a moment, the pain receded. Then alarms started screaming. What now? Jace pulled up the diagnostics, his heart sinking. The fuel cells. Those rapid transitions burned through more than calculated.
How much do we have?
Enough for maybe 2 more hours at standard consumption. Less if we have to evade again. Seraphine was quiet for a moment, studying stellar charts with an intensity that he could feel through their link.
There's a way,
she said finally. But you won't like it. She showed him the route. It curved through a section of space marked with warnings in a dozen languages. The Shattered Reach, where an ancient battle had left reality itself wounded. Ships that entered either never emerged or came out changed in fundamental ways. The tide roads run differently there, she explained. Like rapids over broken stone. We could cover the remaining distance in an hour. But we might not survive it. Our chances are better than running out of fuel in normal space. Jace studied the route, feeling the mathematics of it through their connection. It was insane, probably impossible, and absolutely their only option. Story of his life lately. Plot the course, he said. And maybe tell me more about this seed we're carrying. If we're going to die for it, I'd like to know why it matters. Seraphine's mental presence warmed with approval. As she calculated their new trajectory, she opened a secure compartment in the ship's core, Inside, cushioned by fields of coherent energy, lay an object that defied easy description. It looked like a sphere of crystallized water, if water could hold starlight. Within its depths, patterns swirled that might have been DNA helixes or galactic spirals or both. It pulsed with a rhythm that matched their joined heartbeats. "The seed of kinship," Seraphine said reverently, "created at the first meeting of our species, when a human explorer saved a Lithari colony ship from a quantum storm. The grateful colonists offered their most sacred treasure, a fragment of the first ocean, the birthplace of our species. The human offered in return a sample of Earth's primordial soup, preserved from your world's beginning. They mixed them, more than mixed. They found a way to make them sing together, to prove that life recognizes life, regardless of its origin." She touched the containment field gently. "Every coronation, the seed reminds us that we are all children of the cosmos. That's why hardliners like Threx fear it. It's proof that purity is an illusion." The ship shuddered as they approached the edge of the shattered reach. Through the viewport, space itself looked wrong. Stars were smeared across the void like paint, their light arriving from multiple angles simultaneously. Debris from the ancient battle still drifted, some of it phasing in and out of existence. "Once we enter, we can't stop," Seraphine warned. "The roads here don't allow for normal transitions. We'll have to ride them all the way through. Together." Together! They plunged in. Reality immediately went insane. The sea sky bucked and twisted through dimensions that shouldn't exist, through the neural link. Jace felt Seraphine's consciousness splice with his own, until he couldn't tell where he ended and she began. They were one mind in two bodies, navigating by instinct and mathematics and sheer stubborn will. Ghost ships flickered past them, vessels caught in temporal loops, fighting the same battle for eternity. Energy discharges that predated their species scorched space around them. The tide roads here were indeed like rapids, but rapids that flowed through time as well as space. Left, they thought as one, banking hard to avoid a probability wave that would have aged them to dust. Down, diving beneath a gravity well that existed in 6 dimensions simultaneously. The ring on Jace's finger had become a band of pure light, the joining bond pushed to its absolute limit. Through the chaos, memories not their own began to bleed through. The ancient battle that had created this wound in space. Lithari and another species, one whose name was lost to time, fighting over principles so fundamental that their conflict had broken reality itself. Both fleets annihilated, their death screams still echoing across dimensions. "We're not going to end like that," Jace gasped, unsure if he spoke aloud or only in their joined mind. "No," Seraphine agreed. "We're going to prove there's another way." The sea sky burst from the shattered reach, like a bullet from a gun, trailing wisps of fractured spacetime. They'd made it. Barely. The ship's hull showed stress fractures that told the story of their passage, and half the systems were offline. But they were alive and intact. And there, hanging in the void before them, was their destination. The Shrine of Tides didn't look like Jace had expected. It wasn't a building or a station but a perfect sphere of water, held in place by forces beyond his understanding. It must have been kilometers across, its surface rippling with waves that caught and reflected starlight. Ships of various species orbited it at respectful distances. Pilgrims come to witness the coronation. "It's beautiful," he breathed. "It's home," Seraphine corrected softly. "Or what home means to us. Every Lithari is born in water, returns to water. The shrine is our reminder of where we came from." They were immediately hailed by multiple vessels, voices overlapping in a cascade of languages. Some welcomed them. Others demanded explanations. Still others warned them to turn back. But one voice cut through the chaos, transmitted on a priority channel that silenced all others. "Seraphine Kale." The speaker was ancient, her harmonics so pure They made the translator weep with effort. "I am High Keeper Nethys. You have brought a human to our most sacred place." "I have brought my husband," Seraphine corrected firmly, "as is my right by blood and bond." A long pause. Then, "Approach. The waters will judge." They docked at a crystalline platform that extended from the sphere like a frozen wave. Other Lethari waited there, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely contained hostility. But Jace had eyes, only for the figure at their center. High Keeper Nethys looked like she'd been carved from living pearl, her form flowing between states of matter, as if she couldn't quite decide whether to be solid or liquid. Her eyes were depths that had seen the birth of stars. "Show me," she said simply. Seraphine held out her hand, the one that bore a ring matching Jace's. Nethys studied it for a long moment, then turned those impossible eyes on Jace himself. He felt her gaze like pressure at the bottom of an ocean trench. "You are dying," she observed. "The joining sustains you, but your body fails." "I'll last long enough," Jace said. "The seed needs to reach the shrine." "Does it?" She tilted her head, a gesture eerily similar to Seraphine's. "Or do you simply need to prove that unity is possible, that the fear driving our species apart is built on lies?" Before he could answer, alarms rang out across the platform. Ships were emerging from fold space. Dozens of them. Threx's purifiers had found them. "Inside," Nethys commanded. "The coronation cannot be delayed." They ran, Jace's damaged leg nearly buckling before Seraphine caught him. Through their link, he felt her pouring strength into him, depleting her own reserves to keep him moving. The interior of the shrine was a maze of flowing water, held in impossible configurations. Streams that flowed upward, pools that existed in multiple locations simultaneously. The heart chamber. Nethys led them deeper, where the first waters touched the void. Behind them, Jace could hear fighting. Some of the pilgrims were trying to hold off Threx's fanatics, buying them time. The seed pulsed in its containment field, seeming to sense the proximity of its destination. They emerged into a sphere within a sphere, a perfect bubble of air surrounded by water on all sides. At its center grew something that might have been coral, or crystal, or both. A structure that reached from floor to ceiling like a frozen waterfall. "Place the seed," Nethys instructed. Seraphine moved forward, but Jace stopped her. Through their link, he'd felt something wrong. A dissonance in the harmonics around them. "Wait," he said. "It's a trap." Threx stepped from behind the coral structure, no longer wearing his religious robes but full combat armor that made him look like a walking fortress. In his hands, he carried a weapon that hurt to look at, something that existed partially in normal space and partially somewhere else. "Perceptive, for a human," he said. "I've been here for hours, waiting." The old keeper was quite cooperative once I explained the stakes. "Nethys would never," Seraphine began. "The real Nethys wouldn't," Threx agreed. "But she's been feeding the fishes for some time now. My associate has many talents." The false Nethys shimmered, her form restructuring itself into someone terrifyingly familiar. Director Miles stood before them, wearing a biomimetic suit that had perfectly replicated the keeper's appearance. "I must admit," Miles said conversationally, "Lethari biotechnology is impressive. This suit let me fool even their best sensors, though maintaining the act has been exhausting." "You're working together," Jace said, the pieces finally clicking into place. "This was never about the treaty. It was about the seed." "The seed is an abomination," Threx spat. "Proof of our species' weakness, our willingness to dilute what makes us unique." "The seed is also incredibly valuable," Miles added. "The biotechnology alone could revolutionize a dozen industries, and all it required was ensuring the coronation failed. The treaty collapsed, and both our governments were too busy blaming each other to notice what really happened." "You killed my sister," Jace said quietly. Miles shrugged. She was getting too close to certain shipping irregularities. Weapons being moved off the books. Funds redirected to more practical purposes. Her death was regrettable but necessary. The rage that flooded through the neural link was volcanic. But it wasn't just Jace's. Seraphine's fury at the betrayal, at the callous destruction of life for profit, merged with his own, until they could barely contain it. "You want the seed?" Seraphine's voice carried harmonics that made the water walls ripple. "Take it." She threw the containment field high into the air. Both Miles and Threx lunged for it, their temporary alliance shattering in the face of prize. In that moment of distraction, Jace and Seraphine moved as one. The joining bond flared to full strength. They didn't need to speak, didn't need to plan. Their bodies moved in perfect synchronization, Seraphine's grace combining with Jace's trained reflexes. She went low, her form flowing like water around Threx's grasp. He went high, using his momentum to drive both himself and Miles into the coral structure. The seed hung in the air, its containment field failing. In seconds, it would fall and shatter, its potential lost forever. Unless... Together, they said as one. They reached for the seed simultaneously, their joined hands closing around it, just as the field collapsed. The moment their flesh touched the artifact, everything changed. The seed wasn't just a symbol. It was a living record of unity, a crystallized moment when two species chose cooperation over conflict. Power flooded through them, not destructive, but creative, showing them possibilities beyond imagination. Through the seed's vision, they saw the truth. The war between their species hadn't been inevitable. It had been engineered, carefully cultivated by those who profited from division. People like Miles, who sold weapons to both sides. Fanatics like Threx, who needed an enemy to justify their existence. But they also saw the alternative. Human creativity merged with Lithari intuition. Technologies that could heal worlds, explore dimensions, touch the face of creation itself. All it required was the choice to trust, to build rather than destroy. "No," Threx roared, raising his impossible weapon. "I won't let you corrupt everything." He fired. The beam was darkness visible, a negation of existence itself. It should have unmade them entirely. Instead, it hit a barrier of pure light. The seed's power, channeled through their joining, created a shield that turned destruction into transformation. The dark energy became ribbons of color that painted new possibilities across the water walls. "Your fear has no power here," Seraphine said, her voice carrying the authority of ancient queens. "This is a place of joining, not division." Miles tried to run, but the waters of the shrine itself rose to stop him. Not violent, just inexorable, holding him in place like the weight of justice itself. "You killed Sarah," Jay said, walking forward slowly. His leg no longer hurt. The seed's energy had healed the damage, though he could feel it wouldn't last. "You killed her for money." "The strong survive," Miles said, still defiant. "That's the only law that matters." "No," Jay said simply. "The strong protect. That's what Sarah believed. That's what she died for." He could kill Miles. The power flowing through him made it possible, even easy. One thought, and the man who'd murdered his sister would cease to exist. Instead, he pulled out his communicator and opened a channel to both fleets. "This is Captain Jace Rowan aboard the Shrine of Tides. We have Director Miles and Archivist Threx in custody for conspiracy, murder, and attempted destruction of cultural artifacts. We request immediate diplomatic security to take them into custody." The response was chaos, dozens of voices demanding explanations. But through it all, one voice cut clear, the scarred human commander from earlier. "Captain Rowan, this is Admiral Foster. We're on our way. And Captain Goodwork." The seed pulsed one more time, then settled into dormancy. Its work was done. The power that had filled them faded, leaving Jace and Seraphine standing hand in hand in the heart chamber. Around them, the waters began to sing, recognizing the successful completion of a coronation unlike any before. "So," Jace said, suddenly exhausted, "we saved the treaty, exposed the conspiracy, and possibly created a new form of technology. Not bad for a first date." Seraphine laughed, the sound pure as starlight. "We also need to discuss our living arrangements. The joining bond is permanent now, strengthened by the seed. We literally can't be apart for more than a few days without both of us suffering." "I can think of worse fates," he admitted. Through their link, he felt her joy at his acceptance, tinged with worry about their future.
"It won't be easy," she warned. "There will be those on both sides who see our joining as betrayal."
"Then, we'll face them together." He squeezed her hand, feeling the rings pulse in harmony. "After all, we're family now." The waters of the shrine rose around them in celebration, carrying their image to every screen in the system, human and Lithari, joined in defiance of those who would divide them. It wasn't the ending to the coronation anyone had expected. It was better. The holding cells aboard Admiral Foster's flagship were state-of-the-art, designed to contain everything from war criminals to exotic alien entities. Jace stood before the transparent aluminum barrier, watching Director Miles pace his cell like a caged predator. 3 weeks had passed since the coronation, and the joint tribunal was set to begin tomorrow. "Come to gloat?" Miles asked without turning around. His perfectly pressed uniform had been replaced with standard prisoner grays, but he still carried himself with the same arrogant precision.
"I came for answers," Jace said.
Through the neural link, he felt Seraphine's presence from the adjacent interrogation room where she was dealing with Threx. Her emotional support steadied him. Sarah's personal effects included a message chip, encrypted, but we finally cracked it. Miles finally turned, his ice chip eyes showing the first crack of uncertainty.
"Oh."
"She knew what you were doing. The weapons shipments, the false flag operations, the way you were playing both sides to extend the conflict." Jace pulled out a datapad, Sarah's final message glowing on its surface. "She was going to expose you, but she wanted to give you a chance to come clean first. She believed in redemption, even for someone like you." "Naive girl," Miles said, but there was something hollow in his voice. "She recorded your response," Jace continued. "You laughed at her, told her idealists like her were the first casualties of real politics. Then you had her transport rerouted into that meteor storm."
"You can't prove."
"We can. Seraphine's access to Lithari quantum databases let us recover the original routing codes. Your authorization signature is all over them." Jace stepped closer to the barrier. "What I don't understand is why. The weapons trafficking, the profiteering. I get that. But Sarah wasn't going public. She offered you a way out." Miles was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weariness Jace had never heard before. "You want to know why? Because she reminded me of myself, 30 years ago, before I learned that hope is just another weapon people use against you. That's it, you killed her because she made you feel guilty. I killed her because guilt is a luxury I couldn't afford." Miles sat on his cell's single bench, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. "Do you know what the mortality rate was for human colonies during the first decade of expansion? 40%? Nearly half our settlements wiped out by hostile environments, equipment failures, or alien encounters. I was part of the emergency response teams. We'd arrived to find entire families dead, children frozen in their beds because some bureaucrat had cut corners on heating systems to save money." Jace said nothing, letting him talk. Through the link, he felt Seraphine urging patience. "I swore I'd change things," Miles continued. "Rose through the ranks, played their political games, made compromises. Small ones at first. Vote for this military spending bill and I'll support your education reform. Look the other way on that contractor's safety violations, and they'll fast-track emergency supplies. Each compromise made sense at the time.
Until you became the thing you fought against.
Until I became effective. Miles looked up, and for a moment, Jace saw the man he might have been. The conflict with the Lithari has driven more technological advancement in 20 years than the previous century. Medical breakthroughs from combat surgery, navigation improvements from military requirements. Even your neural link technology came from weapons research. Built on how many graves? Fewer than would have died from stagnation. But the words lacked conviction. Your sister. She had data showing both sides were ready for peace, that the populations were exhausted, ready to accept almost any terms. She wanted to fast-track the treaty. And peace would have ended your profit margins. Peace would have ended the progress. Miles slammed his fist against the wall. Without an external threat, humanity falls apart. We need conflict to drive us forward. No, Jace said quietly. You need conflict to justify what you've become. Sarah understood something you've forgotten. Humans don't need war to grow. We need challenges, yes. But they don't have to come from killing each other. He turned to leave, then paused. The siege showed us what human-Lithari cooperation could achieve. Technologies that make your weapons look like stone tools. We'll build the future Sarah believed in, with or without you. Rowan, Miles called as Jace reached the door. For what it's worth, your sister was the best of us. I'm sorry she had to die for me to remember that. Jace left without responding. Some apologies came too late to matter. He found Seraphine in the observation lounge, staring out at the assembled fleets. Human and Lithari ships hung in the same space without shooting at each other, which still felt like a minor miracle. She looked tired, the strain of simultaneous translations and cultural mediation wearing on her. How did it go with Threx? He asked, settling beside her. He tried to convert me to his cause for 2 hours, she said, leaning against him. Through their bond, he felt her exhaustion like a weight. Quoted scripture, genealogies, prophecies. He genuinely believes that contact between our species will destroy both. That purity of essence is the only way to survive. Maybe he's right, Jace said. We're definitely changing each other. Look at us. It was true. 3 weeks of constant neural connection had altered them both in subtle ways. Seraphine's movements had picked up some of his human directness, while he found himself thinking in the flowing patterns of Lithari logic. They'd become something new. Neither fully human nor Lithari, but a bridge between both. Change isn't destruction, she said. It's growth. Threx can't see that because fear blinds him to possibilities. An alert chimed on Jace's communicator. Shuttle arriving from Earth. Someone important wants to meet us. The shuttle bay was buzzing with security when they arrived. Whatever dignitary was visiting, they warranted protection usually reserved for heads of state. Jace was about to ask Admiral Foster what was happening when the shuttle doors opened and his world tilted. Mom. Marin Rowan stepped out of the shuttle, moving with the careful dignity of someone fighting age and winning. She wore her old medical corps uniform, the one she'd retired in 20 years ago. Her eyes, the same green as his own, found him immediately. Jace, she said simply. Then her gaze shifted to Seraphine. And you must be my daughter-in-law. The media doesn't do you justice, dear. Jace felt Seraphine's shock through their link, followed quickly by a warm pulse of joy. Mrs. Rowan, I'm honored to— None of that, Marin interrupted, pulling them both into a hug that somehow encompassed 2 different species' comfort zones. Family calls me Mom or Marin. Your choice. Mom, Jace managed, his voice thick. What are you doing here? How did you even get clearance? Oh, that? Marin waved dismissively. It turns out saving the Lithari Queen Mother's life 40 years ago comes with some perks. She insisted I attend the tribunal as a cultural witness. Seraphine went very still. The Queen Mother. You knew my grandmother. Knew her child. I delivered her last daughter during the refugee crisis of '85. Marin studied Seraphine's face with the clinical eye of a longtime medic. You have her eyes, and her stubbornness, from what I've heard. They made their way to Jace's quarters, Marin peppering them with questions about their health, the neural link, and whether they were eating properly. It was surreal and wonderful and exactly what he hadn't known he needed. The link is stable, Seraphine assured her. Though we're still learning its full implications. The joining bond was never meant to be pushed as far as we've taken it. Marin pulled out a medical scanner that looked older than Jace. May I, old habits. She ran the scanner over both of them, frowning at the results. Fascinating. Your neural patterns aren't just linked. They're harmonizing, creating new pathways that didn't exist in either species before. Is that bad? Jace asked. Different isn't bad, son. It's just different. She put away the scanner and fixed them both with a look he remembered from childhood. Now, tell me about this conspiracy. The real story, not the sanitized version they're feeding the media. They talked for hours, sharing everything from the accidental marriage to the confrontation at the shrine. Marin listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Show me your rings, she said finally. They held out their hands. The joining bands had evolved since the coronation, becoming more complex, almost organic in their design. Marin studied them with an expression Jace couldn't read. I have something to show you, she said, reaching into her travel bag. I've been waiting for the right moment. She pulled out a small box made of metal Jace didn't recognize. Inside, cushioned in synthetic wool, lay two items, a silver ring that looked ancient and a hollow cube that flickered with age. Play the recording, Marin said softly. The hollow cube activated, projecting an image that made Seraphine gasp. A younger Marin stood beside a Lithari woman who could only be the Queen Mother, their hands clasped over a newborn child. This was taken just after I delivered Princess Aelin, Seraphine's mother, Marin explained. The Queen Mother was dying. Complications from the birth, exacerbated by the refugee ship's failing life support. I managed to stabilize her, but we both knew she didn't have long. The recorded Queen Mother spoke, her harmonics weak but clear. You have given me the gift of seeing my daughter live. In return, I offer a gift of my own. She held out the silver ring. This is a promise ring, keeper of vows between our houses. If ever our children's children should meet and choose each other freely, this ring will recognize the bond. Present day, Marin picked up the silver ring, holding it to the light. She gave this to me, along with a promise. If humanity and the Lithari ever found peace, and if our families ever connected, the rings would know. You're saying our joining wasn't random? Seraphine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm saying the universe has a sense of poetry, Marin replied. You chose each other. The rings just recognized something that was always possible. Jace felt his worldview reshaping itself. Did you know when I took the job? I hoped, Marin admitted. When I saw Seraphine's name in the diplomatic reports, I wondered, but I couldn't be sure until... She gestured at their joined hands. The rings tell the truth. You chose each other freely, without knowing the connection. That's what matters. Through their link, Jace felt Seraphine processing this revelation. Wonder, confusion, and underneath it all, a growing sense of rightness. Your grandmother never told me, Seraphine said to Marin. She was protecting you. Arranged marriages were still common among the nobility then. She wanted you to have the freedom to choose. Marin smiled. And you did. Both of you. A chime interrupted them. Admiral Foster's voice came through the comm system. Captain Rowan, Princess Seraphine, please report to Conference Room Alpha. The tribunal pre-hearing is about to begin. The conference room was packed with representatives from both species. Jace recognized some faces from news broadcasts, politicians, military leaders, cultural figures. At the center sat 3 judges, 1 human, 1 Lethari, and 1 from the neutral Kespan Commerce Guild. Before we begin the formal tribunal, the human judge announced, there's the matter of the neural link evidence. The defense has raised concerns about its admissibility. A lawyer Jace didn't recognize stood up. Your Honors, the neural link between Captain Rowan and Princess Seraphine creates an unprecedented situation. Any evidence gathered through their connection could be considered tainted by their emotional bond. Tainted, Seraphine's voice carried dangerous harmonics. Our bond allowed us to uncover the truth. Your bond makes you unreliable witnesses, the lawyer countered. How can we trust testimony from 2 minds that have merged? How do we know which thoughts are yours and which are influenced by your partner? It was a valid legal point, Jace had to admit. The joining bond did blur the lines between individuals. But before he could respond, another voice spoke from the gallery. I can answer that. A Lethari woman stood, her bearing regal despite her simple clothes. She looked to be middle-aged, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. I am Dr. Yalen Cade, neural specialist and designer of the joining band technology. She moved to the witness area with fluid grace. With the court's permission, I'd like to address these concerns. The judges conferred briefly, then nodded. Proceed, Dr. Cade. The joining bands don't merge personalities, she explained, pulling up holographic displays of neural patterns. They create a bridge, allowing shared perception and emotion, but core identity remains intact. Observe. The display showed 2 distinct pattern sets, connected by flowing lines of energy. Captain Rowan's neural signature, marked by human linear processing and individual-focused cognition. Princess Seraphine's signature, showing Lethari parallel processing and collective harmony patterns. Even after 3 weeks of constant connection, these fundamental patterns remain distinct. But they're changing, the skeptical lawyer pointed out. Growing, Dr. Cade corrected. Adding new pathways while maintaining their core structure. It's not unlike learning a new language. You don't lose your native tongue by becoming bilingual. Then their testimony can be trusted, the Lethari judge asked. More than trusted. Enhanced. Dr. Cade smiled. Their dual perspective allows them to see patterns that neither species alone would notice. The evidence they've gathered isn't tainted by their bond. It's clarified by it. The judges huddled in discussion. Finally, the Kespan judge spoke. We'll allow the neural link evidence, but with the understanding that both Captain Rowan and Princess Seraphine must testify separately to verify key points. Court is adjourned until tomorrow's formal proceedings. As the room emptied, Dr. Cade approached them. Princess, Captain, a moment of your time. Up close, Jace could see the family resemblance. You're related to Seraphine. Distant cousin, Dr. Cade confirmed. But, more importantly, I've been studying your case since the coronation. What you've achieved shouldn't be possible according to everything we know about the joining bands. What do you mean? Seraphine asked. Dr. Cade pulled up their neural scans. The bands were designed for temporary connection, a few hours at most, to allow ceremonial joining for specific purposes. But you've maintained constant connection for weeks, through combat, dimensional shifts, even integration with the seed. The bands should have burned out. You should have suffered catastrophic neural feedback. But we didn't, Jay said. No, you thrived. Which means either I fundamentally misunderstood my own creation, or... She paused, studying them. You've discovered something new, a way of joining that goes beyond the technology. Through their link, Jace felt Seraphine's scientific curiosity ignite. You think we've evolved the bond. I think you've proved that connection isn't about technology at all. It's about choice, trust, and something my instruments can't quite measure. Dr. Cade smiled. My grandmother would have been proud. She always said the bands were just training wheels for something greater. Your grandmother, Seraphine's eyes widened. Your Queen Mother Yelin's granddaughter. Named for her. Yes. She believed our species were meant to grow together. That isolation would doom us both. She looked at their joined hands. You're living proof she was right. That evening, they gathered in the observation lounge for what had become a ritual. Jace's mother, Seraphine, Dr. Cade, and surprisingly, Admiral Foster, who'd become something of an ally during the investigation. Tomorrow's going to be rough, Foster warned. Miles has hired the best defense team money can buy. They'll try to paint you both as traumatized lovers seeking revenge rather than justice. Let them try, Marin said firmly. The truth has a way of shining through lies. Speaking of truth, Jay said, there's something I don't understand. Miles had everything. Power, money, influence. Why work with Threx? Their goals were completely different. Were they? Seraphine mused. Both wanted the conflict to continue. Both saw peace as a threat to their worldview. The fact that they came from opposite sides just made their alliance more effective. Extremes meeting in the middle. Foster agreed. I've seen it before. The most dangerous conspiracies aren't between natural allies, but between enemies who realize they need each other. Through the transparent walls, they could see maintenance crews working on ships from both fleets. Human technicians teaching Lithari engineers about phase variance repairs. Lithari healers showing human medics how to read bioharmonic frequencies. Small steps, but real ones. They're going to ask about our future, Seraphine said quietly. Whether we plan to stay joined. What it means for human-Lithari relations. What do we tell them? Jace asked. The truth, she said simply. That we choose each other, every day. That our bond isn't about politics or treaties, but about two people who found something worth fighting for. 3 people, Marin corrected. Family means you're never fighting alone. The next morning came too quickly. The tribunal chamber had been transformed overnight, filled to capacity with observers from dozens of worlds. The defendants sat at separate tables, Miles maintaining his cold dignity, Threx radiating zealous defiance. The lead prosecutor, a human woman named Vera Singh, opened with devastating precision. She laid out the conspiracy in detail, showing how Miles had manipulated shipping routes to create conflicts, how Threx had used religious authority to radicalize followers, how they'd coordinated to sabotage peace efforts. The defendants will claim they acted from conviction, Singh said. That Director Miles believed conflict drove progress, that Archivist Threx sought to preserve cultural purity, but their own communications reveal the truth. They acted from fear. Fear of change, fear of lost power, fear of a future they couldn't control. The defense tried every tactic. They questioned the chain of evidence, challenged witness credibility, attempted to paint Miles and Threx as patriots who'd lost their way. But each argument fell apart when faced with the meticulous data Jace and Seraphine had gathered. Then came the moment Jace had dreaded. He was called to testify about Sarah. Captain Rowan, the defense lawyer began, isn't it true that your sister's death motivated your entire investigation? Yes, Jace said simply. So this could all be an elaborate revenge scheme. Using your unusual relationship with Princess Seraphine to fabricate evidence. Jace felt anger spike through the link, but Seraphine's calm presence steadied him. My sister believed in justice, not revenge. Everything we uncovered, we found by following her leads. She did the real work. We just finished it. How convenient that she's not here to verify that. No, Jace said, his voice hard. It's not convenient. It's a tragedy. Sarah should be here, testifying herself. She should be seeing the peace she worked for. The fact that she's not is exactly why we're here. He pulled out his datapad, projecting Sarah's final message for the court to see. Her face, young and determined, filled the screens.
If you're seeing this, Sarah's recorded voice said, it means something's happened to me. I've discovered evidence of weapons trafficking that goes to the highest levels of both governments. I'm going to confront Director Miles tomorrow. Give him a chance to come clean. I still believe people can choose to do the right thing. But if something happens to me, please, don't let this die with me. The truth matters. Peace matters. We can be better than our fears. The courtroom was silent when the message ended. Even Miles looked affected, his cold mask cracking slightly. Seraphine testified next, her natural dignity and precise recall making her an devastating witness. She detailed Threx's radicalization efforts, his perversion of Letheri spiritual teachings to serve his agenda. Our joining traditions were meant to celebrate connection, she said, looking directly at Threx. You turned them into weapons of division. You made our people fear the very thing that could save us, the courage to trust beyond our own species. Threx couldn't contain himself. You dare lecture me on tradition while wearing that abomination on your finger? You've contaminated our entire bloodline. I've enriched it, Seraphine replied calmly. Every moment I spend connected to Jace, I discover new ways of thinking, new solutions to old problems. We're not losing ourselves. We're becoming more than either of us could be alone. The trial continued for hours, with witness after witness adding pieces to the puzzle. The injured from the refueling station Threx had destroyed. The families of soldiers killed in manufactured conflicts. Engineers who discovered sabotage in peacekeeping equipment. Finally, it was time for closing arguments. Prosecutor Singh stood one last time. The defendants want you to believe they're patriots. Visionaries even. But patriotism doesn't require innocent blood. Vision doesn't demand blindness to suffering. They chose fear over hope, division over connection, profit over people. They chose to be less than what both our species can be. I ask you to choose differently. Choose justice. Choose the future Sarah Rowan believed in, that Princess Seraphine and Captain Rowan are building with their bond. Choose to say that no one, regardless of position or belief, is above the law that protects us all. The deliberation took 3 days. When the judges returned, their faces were solemn but unanimous. On all charges of conspiracy, murder, terrorism, and treason against sentient rights, the Kespan judge announced, "We find the defendants guilty." Miles received life imprisonment with the possibility of rehabilitation after 30 years. Threx, whose crimes included direct violence, received life without parole. Both would serve their sentences in neutral facilities, prevented from becoming martyrs to their causes. As they were led away, Miles stopped beside Jace. "Your sister would be proud," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I forgot that people like her are why we're supposed to fight in the first place." Jace nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Through the link, he felt Seraphine's hand find his. Later, in the quiet of their quarters, they finally allowed themselves to feel the weight of it all. Justice had been served, but it couldn't bring back the dead or undo the years of manufactured conflict. "What now?" Seraphine asked, curled against his side. "Now we build," Jace said. "The treaty's safe. The conspiracy's exposed. We can actually work on bringing our species together." "Together," she agreed. Then, more quietly, "Your mother asked me something earlier, about children." Jace felt his heart skip. "What did you tell her?" "That we're still learning what our bond means. That hybrid biology is complicated. That there's no precedent for what we are." She paused. "And that despite all that, the idea doesn't scare me anymore." Through their link, he felt the depth of her meaning. Not just children, but a future. A life built on the connection they'd forged in crisis, but that had grown into something deeper. "We should probably figure out where we're going to live first," he said, aiming for lightness. "Details," she laughed. "Though I was thinking we could split time between Earth and Tamaris. Your mother mentioned she wouldn't mind relocating to help with future possibilities."
Of course she did, but he was smiling. A year ago, I was a burned-out pilot looking for revenge. Now I'm married to alien royalty, neurally linked for life, and discussing real estate across star systems. Regrets. There was genuine concern in her voice. Never. He turned to face her fully. Sarah used to say that the universe gives us what we need, not what we expect. I needed justice, but I found you, found us, found proof that connection is stronger than division. The rings on their fingers pulsed in harmony, a gentle reminder of the bond they'd chosen and continued to choose. Outside their window, the stars wheeled on, indifferent to human or Lethari concerns. But between those stars, ships were learning to fly together, creating new paths through the void. So, Seraphine said with a smile that still made his heart race. Ready for whatever comes next? With you always. They sealed the promise with a kiss that transcended species. A moment of perfect understanding between minds that had touched the infinite and chosen to remain intertwined. The future stretched before them, uncertain, but no longer fearsome. They would face it together, bound by choice and circumstance, by justice served and love discovered, by a ring that had recognized what their hearts took longer to understand. Some connections are written in the stars, waiting for the brave enough to reach for them. The stars continued their eternal dance, but now they danced to a rhythm of hope. 6 months after the tribunal, New Avalon Station had transformed. What was once a neutral port had become the de facto capital of human Lethari cooperation. Jace stood in the newly constructed Integration Center, watching human and Lethari engineers argue over a holographic blueprint. Their debate was heated, but collaborative, exactly the kind of productive conflict both species needed. The harmonic resonance chamber needs to be wider, insisted Tal Iron, the Lethari engineer who'd become their unofficial technical liaison. His crystalline form caught the light as he gestured. The frequencies won't propagate properly in that confined space. Make it wider and we compromise structural integrity, countered Maria Santos, her augmented arms crossing firmly. Human safety standards exist for a reason. Then we reinforce with bioceramic struts, Seraphine suggested, materializing beside Jace with her characteristic fluid grace. Through their bond, he'd felt her approaching, but her presence still sent warmth through him. Lethari grown, human tested, best of both. The engineers exchanged glances, then nodded. It was becoming a familiar pattern: conflict, collaboration, innovation. The joining of their species wasn't easy, but it was working. Ambassador duties, Jace asked, as they walked toward their shared office. Cultural Integration Committee, she confirmed. They want to establish standardized protocols for neural linking. Make sure what happened to us doesn't happen accidentally to others. Accidentally marry alien royalty. Expose massive conspiracy. Save galactic peace. He grinned. Sounds like a typical Tuesday to me now. She laughed, the sound still music to his ears. Speaking of typical, your mother called. She wants us to visit the new medical facility on Tamaris. Something about groundbreaking developments she thinks we should see. Through their link, Jace caught an undercurrent of meaning. She's not subtle, is she? About wanting grandchildren, no. She's about as subtle as a supernova. Seraphine's expression grew more serious. But she may have a point. Dr. Cade has been researching our bond, and she says the biological integration is deeper than we thought. They reached their office, a hybrid space that combined human functionality with Lethari aesthetics. Water features flowed impossibly upward along the walls, while traditional earth plants grew in harmony with bioluminescent Lethari flora. It was a living symbol of what they were trying to build. Asha Cade, the investigative journalist who'd helped expose the conspiracy, was waiting for them. She'd traded her war correspondent gear for something more professional, but her eyes still held that sharp hunger for truth. Interview time already, Jace checked his chronometer.
I thought that wasn't until...
Alarms began blaring throughout the station. Not the gentle chimes of standard alerts, but the harsh klaxon reserved for serious emergencies. Through the windows, they could see ships scrambling, both human and Lithari vessels moving with urgent purpose. Report! Seraphine's voice carried command authority as she activated the emergency communication system. Admiral Foster's face appeared on screen, grim and focused. We've got a situation at the Shattered Reach. Unknown vessels. Configuration we've never seen before. They're not responding to any communication attempts.
Pirates, Jace asked, already moving toward their equipment lockers.
Negative. These ships are different. Advanced. They came through the Reach like it was normal space. Foster paused. And they're broadcasting something. A repeating signal in old Lithari script. Seraphine went very still. Through their bond, Jace felt her shock and something else. Recognition.
The Lost Fleet, she whispered.
That's a myth, Tal Iron protested, appearing on a secondary screen from engineering.
The expedition that went to map beyond the Reach disappeared 500 years ago. They're long dead.
Are they? Seraphine moved to the communication panel, entering commands with desperate speed. Computer, analyze the signal pattern. Compare to pre-Reach expedition protocols. The results made her sink into a chair. 96% match. It's them. The Lost Fleet has returned.
After 500 years, Asha had her recorder out, documenting everything. What could have survived that long?
We're about to find out, Jace said. Admiral, we need a ship. If this is really the Lost Fleet, they'll need someone who can navigate between our current cultures and their ancient one. Already thought of that, Foster replied.
The Sea Sky has been refitted and is waiting in Bay 12. But Rowan, be careful. We don't know what 5 centuries in unknown space might have done to them.
20 minutes later, they were aboard the Sea Sky, its familiar controls welcoming them like an old friend. The ship had been upgraded with the best of both species' technology. Its hybrid nature no longer an experiment, but a proven advantage.
Plotting course for the Shattered Reach, Seraphine announced, her hands dancing over the navigation console. It'll take us 3 hours at maximum burn.
Then we'd better use the time wisely. Jace pulled up historical files on the Lost Fleet. Tell me everything about this expedition.
As they flew,
Seraphine shared the story. 500 years ago, at the height of Lithari expansion, an expedition had been launched to explore beyond the Shattered Reach. 300 ships, carrying the best and brightest of their civilization. They'd entered that wounded space and never returned.
My ancestors believed they found something, she explained. A passage to another realm, a place where the laws of physics work differently. But most assumed they were simply destroyed.
And now they're back. Jace studied the sensor readings being relayed from the scene. 12 ships, from the look of it, out of 300. 12 more than anyone expected, Seraphine pointed out. Through their link, he felt her struggling with the implications. If they survived in the Reach for 5 centuries, what have they become? They dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Shattered Reach to find a standoff. Human and Lithari vessels had formed a defensive perimeter, weapons powered, but not aimed. Beyond them, barely visible against the twisted space of the Reach, hung 12 ships that defied easy description. They'd started as Lithari vessels. That much was clear. But centuries of adaptation had changed them into something else. Their hulls were covered in what looked like coral growths, if coral could be made of crystallized space-time. Energy patterns flowed across their surfaces in ways that made Jace's eyes water.
They're beautiful, Seraphine breathed.
And terrible.
Incoming transmission, Jace reported. I'm not sure our systems can process it properly.
The main screen flickered, displaying a figure that was almost Lithari. The basic form was there, but overlaid with adaptations that spoke of evolution under impossible conditions. Her skin showed fractal patterns that shifted with each movement. Her eyes held depths that seemed to look through time itself. "I am Shaper Velix," the figure spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that the translator struggled with. "We have returned from the deep reach, bearing gifts and warnings. Who speaks for the current age?" Seraphine straightened, every inch the royal heir. "I am Seraphine Kale, third heir to the title throne. With me is Captain Jace Rowan of Earth. We speak for the united peoples of this space." United. Velix tilted her head, the gesture eerily familiar, yet wrong. Humans and Lithari joined the projection suggested war unto extinction. "We chose a different path," Jace said. "Though it wasn't easy. Your return comes at a time of new peace between our species." "Peace." Velix seemed to taste the word. "Yes, you will need that for what comes. May we board direct communication is necessary." Jace and Seraphine exchanged glances. Protocol said to meet on neutral ground, but something in Velix's manner suggested urgency beyond politics. "Permission granted," Seraphine said. "Bay 2 is prepared." What docked with their ship defied easy categorization. It was less a shuttle and more a living thing, something that had grown rather than been built. When Velix emerged, she brought two companions, both showing similar adaptations to life in impossible space. "You've changed," Seraphine said simply, as they gathered in the Sea Skies conference room. "We've survived," Velix corrected. "The deep reach is not kind to static forms. We learned to flow, to adapt, to become what was needed." She paused, studying them. "You've changed as well. The neural bonding. Yes, we can taste it in the quantum foam around you." "You know about the joining bands?" Jace asked. "We invented them," one of Velix's companions said. "Or rather, we discovered the principles during our exile. The Reach teaches many things to those who survive it." "Which brings us to why you've returned," Seraphine prompted. Velix gestured, and the air between them filled with impossible images. Spaces that folded in on themselves. Entities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Beauty and horror intertwined. "The deep reach is expanding," she said simply. "What was once contained to a single region is growing. Within 50 years, it will encompass this entire sector. Within 100, it will reach both Earth and Tamaris." Silence greeted this pronouncement. Through their link, Jace felt Seraphine's mind racing, calculating implications. "You're saying the shattered reach phenomenon is going to swallow our civilizations?" he asked. "Not swallow. Transform." Velix leaned forward. "The reach is not destruction. It's evolution. But evolution without preparation is catastrophe. We survived because we were lucky, and few. Billions cannot rely on luck." "What do you propose?" Seraphine's voice was steady, but Jace felt her tension. "Union," Velix said. "Not just political, but fundamental. The joining you've achieved is a first step, but both species must learn to adapt, to flow between states as we have. The rigid will shatter. The flexible will transform." "You want to teach us to become like you," Jace summarized. "We want to teach you to become yourselves. But more." Velix smiled, the expression almost human despite her changes. "The deep reach respects consciousness that knows itself truly. Your joining proves it's possible. Now it must spread." They talked for hours, sharing data that made conventional physics weep. The Lost Fleet had spent centuries mapping the deep reach, learning its rules, surviving its tests. They'd lost ships to paradoxes, crew to transformations too extreme to sustain consciousness. But they'd also found wonders. "Show them the garden," one of Velix's companions suggested. The hologram shifted, displaying a place that shouldn't exist. It was a sphere of stable space within the chaos of the Reach, where adapted life from a dozen species grew in harmony. Plants that existed partially in other dimensions. Waters that flowed through time. A sanctuary built by will and understanding. We can teach your people to build such places, Velix offered. Bubbles of stability within the coming change. But it requires the union you've begun. Human linear thought to provide structure. Lethari flow to provide adaptation. Together, you can master what neither could alone. This is too big, Jace said finally. We'd need to convince entire civilizations to undergo fundamental change based on a threat they can't see yet. Then let them see. Velix stood. Choose representatives. We will take them into the border regions of the Deep Reach. Show them what comes. Let them decide if comfortable extinction is preferable to difficult evolution. After they left, promising to hold position while authorities debated, Jace and Seraphine sat in silence. The weight of revelation pressed down on them. Everything we've built, Seraphine said softly. The peace, the integration programs, all of it might be meaningless if this is true. Or it might be exactly what we need, Jace countered. Think about it. If Velix is right, the only way our species survive is together. Really together. Not just politically, but evolutionarily. Through their link, he shared a memory of their joining with the seed, that moment when they'd glimpsed true unity. Seraphine's thoughts brightened. You're right. We're not starting from nothing. We have proof that joining is possible. She stood, determination filling their bond. We need to contact the integration committee immediately. And your mother. My mother, she's been studying our biological integration. If we're going to convince others to undergo joining, we need medical data showing it's safe. Seraphine was already composing messages. And we need Ashakade. This story needs to be told right, or panic will destroy us before the Reach ever could. The next days blurred together. Emergency sessions convened on every world. The Lost Fleet provided demonstration after demonstration, taking volunteer scouts into the Reach's border regions. Every witness returned changed, not physically, but mentally. They'd seen the future rushing toward them. Marin Rowan became an unexpected hero, her medical expertise proving crucial. She documented how the neural joining actually strengthened both species, creating redundancies and adaptations that neither possessed alone. It's not just survival, she explained to a packed conference hall. It's improvement. Every joined pair shows enhanced cognitive function, improved stress response, and most remarkably, an intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics that neither species demonstrated before. Tal Iron led the engineering response, working with Velix's people to design shelters that could exist stable within the Reach. His excitement was infectious as he explained the possibilities. Imagine cities that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, he enthused. Transportation that moves through folded space as easily as walking. Energy drawn from the quantum foam itself. The Reach isn't just a threat. It's an opportunity to transcend every limitation we've accepted. But not everyone was convinced. New factions emerged, some claiming the Lost Fleet were invaders in disguise, others insisting that death was preferable to transformation. A group calling themselves the Pure Remnant began sabotaging joining centers, convinced that species integrity was worth any price. It was during one such attack that everything changed for Jace and Seraphine personally. They'd been visiting a new joining center on Luna, demonstrating the process for potential volunteers. The attack came without warning. Explosives that disrupted local space-time. A weapon clearly inspired by Reach phenomena, but used for destruction. Jace threw himself over a group of children who'd come to see the joined heroes, his body shielding them from the worst of the blast. But the weapon's effects went beyond the physical. He felt something tear in the fabric of his being, the joining bond screaming in protest. When the chaos settled, he couldn't feel Seraphine. The bond that had been constant for over a year was gone, leaving a vacuum that threatened to pull him apart. He found her across the damaged center, alive but unconscious, her ring dark and lifeless. "No," he whispered, crawling to her despite his injuries. "No, we've come too far." Medical teams swarmed them, Marin among them. Her face was grim as she ran scans. "The blast disrupted the quantum entanglement. The rings are offline, possibly permanently. Without them, we die," Jace finished. He could already feel it starting, systems that had grown dependent on their joining beginning to fail. "There might be a way," Dr. Cade said, appearing with Velix at her side. "The Lost Fleet knows techniques beyond our rings. But it would mean—" full transformation," Velix confirmed. "No longer aided by technology, but truly joined at the quantum level. You would become something new. Neither fully human, nor Lithari, but a bridge species. The first of what all must become to survive the Reach." Jace didn't hesitate.
"Do it!"
"Jace," Marin started, but he cut her off.
"Mom, I can't lose her. And more than that, if we're asking others to join, to change, we need to show them it's possible. That love and choice are stronger than fear."
Seraphine's eyes flickered open, pain and understanding in their depths.
"Together,"
she whispered. Velix and her companions surrounded them, their adapted forms beginning a harmonic resonance that made reality ripple. They spoke in languages that predated speech, invoking principles that laughed at conventional physics. Jace felt himself dissolving, his consciousness scattered across probability clouds. But wherever he drifted, Seraphine was there, her essence intertwining with his, at levels that made their previous joining seem superficial. They weren't just sharing thoughts now, they were sharing existence itself. When it was over, they opened eyes that saw spectrums previously invisible. The world was layered with meaning, every surface showing its history and potential futures. Through their new perception, they could see the edges where normal space began to fray, the advancing tide of the Reach, like aurora on the horizon of reality. "How do you feel?" Marin asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Different," they said in unison, then laughed at the stereo effect. With effort, Jace continued alone. "But still us, still me, just more." "The first successful voluntary transformation," Velix observed with satisfaction. "You will be teachers now, guides for those who must follow." The attack that had nearly killed them became the catalyst for acceptance. Seeing the joined heroes survive and transform inspired millions. Joining centers reported record applications. The integration programs expanded beyond cultural exchange to evolutionary preparation. A year passed. The Reach grew closer, its effects now visible to standard instruments. But humanity and the Lithari grew closer too, bound by necessity and hope. The joined pairs numbered in the thousands, each a bridge between species and states of being. Jace stood in the observation deck of New Avalon, watching ships practice Reach navigation techniques. Beside him, Seraphine reviewed reports from across the settled systems. They moved in subtle synchronization, two bodies guided by harmonized consciousness. "The latest projections show we'll have 40% coverage before the Reach fully manifests," she said. "Not enough to save everyone, but enough to preserve civilization." "It'll have to be," he replied. "Though I wonder what we'll call ourselves when this is over. We won't be human, or Lithari anymore. We'll be what we choose to be." She turned to him, eyes dancing with possibilities. "Your mother asked again about grandchildren. I think she's hoping for the first naturally joined generation. And I told her to prepare for the unexpected." She placed a hand on her abdomen, where new life grew in ways that redefined biology. "Our child will be born into a universe where the impossible is every day, where love crosses species and dimensions, where families are chosen and forged in quantum fire." Through their transformed senses, they could feel the tiny consciousness developing, already touched by the Reach's influence, but protected by their joined strength. the first of a new kind, herald of a future that terrified and inspired in equal measure. "No pressure for the kid," Jace said wryly.
"She'll have good teachers," Seraphine replied, "and a universe of wonders to explore."
They stood together, watching the stars shift in patterns that would have driven their ancestors mad, but now seemed like invitations to dance. The reach was coming, inevitable as entropy, but they would meet it with joined hands and merged hearts, proving that transformation wasn't loss, but the price of transcendence. In her latest article, Asha Cade had written, "We stand at the threshold of becoming, not the end of our species, but their graduation into something greater. The joined show us the way, not through surrender to the inevitable, but through choosing our own evolution. In the end, that choice makes us more human and more Lithari than we ever were alone." The future rushed toward them, strange and terrible and beautiful, and they would greet it together, bound by love that had transcended flesh, species, and the very laws of reality itself. The stars continued their dance, but now humanity and the Lithari danced with them, learning steps that would carry them beyond the cosmos they knew into something unimaginable and wonderful. Their joining had begun with a contract and a ring. It would end with the birth of a new kind of life, one that could thrive where the rigid would shatter. The universe itself was transforming, and love would be their guide through the chaos to come. The Reach had been held at bay for 3 years through the combined efforts of joined pairs and Lost Fleet technology. As Jace piloted the Sea Sky toward Earth's orbital medical station, he felt their daughter Coral's excitement through the family bond, a second-generation joining that worked in ways no one had predicted. "Grandma Day," the toddler announced, her words carrying harmonics impossible for a purely human or Lithari throat. "That's right, sweetheart," Seraphine said from the navigator's seat. "We're going to see Grandma Marin." Through their transformed senses, Jace could see the quantum threads that connected their small family. The bonds pulsed with warmth and belonging, stronger than any technology could create. It had taken them years to understand what they'd truly become, not just joined minds, but the living embodiment of a promise made decades ago. Marin waited for them in her office, looking younger than her 70 years thanks to Lithari longevity treatments. But it was the box on her desk that drew their attention, ancient metal that seemed to sing with memory. "It's time," she said simply. "You deserve to know everything." She opened the box with reverent care, revealing not just the silver ring they'd seen before, but a collection of items, 2 more rings, a handful of holocrystals, and what looked like a journal written in both human and old Lithari script. "The night I saved Queen Mother Aelin," Marin began. "She didn't just give me a ring, she gave me a mission." She activated one of the holocrystals, showing a younger version of herself beside the dying Queen Mother. "The war wasn't natural," the Queen Mother's recorded voice whispered. "Forces on both sides profit from our division. They will try again, in your children's time or their children's. When peace finally comes, it will be fragile." Young Marin leaned closer in the recording. "What can I do?" "Protect this." The Queen Mother pressed the box into her hands. "These rings aren't just symbols. They're keys, designed to recognize souls that choose unity over division. When the right hearts find each other, human and Lithari who choose love without knowing the connection, the rings will activate." Present day, Marin picked up the journal. She spent years developing the joining technology, refining it from ancient Lithari bonding traditions. But she made it seem like a ceremonial tool, harmless decoration. She knew that one day, the right pair would discover its true power. "You knew," Jace said, understanding flooding through their bond. "When I took that job, you knew what might happen." "I hoped," Marin corrected. "When I saw Seraphine's name, saw she was coming to New Avalon, I thought maybe, but I couldn't interfere. The joining only works with free choice. So I waited,
and prayed. And when you called to say you'd accidentally married alien royalty, she smiled. I knew Aylin's plan had worked. Coral climbed into her grandmother's lap, tiny fingers reaching for the rings. Pretty, she said. But through the family bond, deeper understanding flowed. Even at 3, she grasped more than her words could express. There's more, Seraphine said, studying the journal. The Queen Mother wasn't just planning for peace. She saw further. She read aloud. The universe tests its children with change. What cannot adapt, dies. What joins together, transforms. Our species were meant to merge, not through conquest but through choice. Love is evolution's greatest tool. She knew about the Reach, Jace asked. Not specifically, but she knew something was coming that would require our species to unite or perish. Marin lifted another ring from the box, this one pulsing with soft light. This was meant for the first naturally joined child. She said they would be the bridge to what comes next. She offered the ring to Coral, who took it with surprising solemnity. The moment it touched her skin, the room filled with harmony. Not sound, but something deeper. A resonance that made reality itself sing. Through their enhanced perception, Jace and Seraphine saw it clearly, threads of connection spreading from their daughter outward, touching every joined pair in the system, creating a web of consciousness that spanned species and space. The network. Velix breathed from the doorway. She'd arrived silently, drawn by the harmonic surge. We theorized it was possible, but to see it manifest. She bowed deeply to Coral. Hello, little shaper. You're going to teach us all, aren't you? Coral giggled, the sound rippling with dimensions. Play now. In a moment, sweetheart, Seraphine said, but she was studying the journal intently. Marin, this last entry. Marin nodded. Read it. Seraphine's voice carried quiet awe as she read, To my daughter's daughter, or my Savior's child's child, I leave you not a burden, but a gift. The rings chose your parents because they chose each other. Love, recognized love across the void. Now you carry both legacies, both strengths. You are what I dreamed but could not build, true unity. Born not from diplomacy, but from two hearts that found each other against all odds. Be the bridge, be the hope. Be the family that spans the stars. Silence settled over them, broken only by Coral's happy humming as she played with light itself, bending photons into impossible patterns. She planned it all, Jace said finally. Not the specifics, but the shape of it. Save a life, plant a seed, trust that love would find a way. And it did. Marin pulled them all into an embrace that included Velix, who accepted it with surprised grace. My son, the rescue pilot, who saved lives because it was right. Seraphine, the scholar princess, who chose connection over isolation. You found each other in a hiring hall, thinking it was chance. Nothing's chance, Coral announced with a certainty only a toddler could manage. Grandma Aylin said so. They all froze. Through the bond, Jace felt Seraphine's shock matching his own. Sweetheart, Seraphine said carefully. When did Grandma Aylin say that? In the dream place, Coral replied, as if it were obvious. She visits sometimes. Says she's proud. Says the rings worked just right. She looked up at her parents with eyes that held stars. Says to tell great-grandma thank you for keeping the promise. Marin's tears came then. Decades of secret burden finally released. She knows. Somehow. She knows. The network connects more than living minds, Velix said softly. In the deep reach, we learned that consciousness leaves impressions, especially when bonded to others. The Queen Mother's love for her family, Marin's dedication to a promise. These things echo in quantum space. She's really there, Marin whispered. Coral patted her great-grandmother's cheek with sticky fingers. Not gone, just different. Like how Mama and Papa are different, but still them. She yawned enormously. Tired now. As Seraphine carried their daughter to the guest quarters, Jace remained with his mother and Velix. The weight of revelation settled around them like a comfortable blanket. "All those years," he said, "you carried this alone." "Not alone," Marin corrected. "I had Sarah, then I had you. I had the promise of family, even when I couldn't see how it would manifest." She squeezed his hand. "Aelin asked me to protect the possibility of unity. I never imagined I'd see it born. Walk into my office, call me Grandma." "The first of many," Velix noted. "Already, 12 more paired pregnancies show signs of natural joining. Your daughter isn't unique. She's the prototype. Within a generation, thousands like her will exist. Within 2, they'll be the majority. And the reach becomes irrelevant." Velix smiled. "Those born joined don't fear transformation. They embody it. The Queen Mother saw the shape of salvation without knowing its name." Later, as the sea sky departed Earth, Jace found Seraphine in their daughter's room, watching Coral sleep. The child glowed softly in the dark, her dreams painting aurora across the walls. "Your grandmother was remarkable," he said, joining her vigil. "She saved us all, decades before we were born." Seraphine leaned into him, their bond humming with contentment. One act of kindness to a human medic, one promise between mothers, and history changed. Through the viewport, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. But now Jace could see deeper, the connections between them, the web of consciousness growing stronger each day, the future being born from choices made in love. "No regrets?" Seraphine asked, echoing their conversation from years ago. "How could I regret this?" He gestured to their sleeping daughter, their joined souls, the family that spanned species and dimensions. "I signed up to be a pilot. I became part of something impossible and wonderful." "The ring did come as a surprise," she teased. "Best surprise of my life." He kissed her, feeling the harmonics of their bond ripple outward. "Though your grandmother apparently knew it would happen all along." "Grandmothers often do," she smiled. "I wonder what Coral will know that we don't." As if in answer, their daughter stirred, murmuring in her sleep, "The stars are singing new songs. Can you hear them?" They could. Through their joined consciousness, through the network their daughter had awakened, through bonds that transcended death and species and the laws of physics themselves. They could hear the universe preparing for its next movement. The reach still advanced, but it no longer brought fear. How could they fear transformation when they lived it every day? How could they doubt survival when love had already conquered the void between species? In her final message, recorded the day she died, Queen Mother Aelin had written, "Families are not born, but chosen. I chose a human medic as sister. She chose to honor that bond. Our grandchildren chose each other without knowing the connection. These choices, made freely in love, are stronger than any force in the universe. They are evolution itself, wearing a wedding ring." Jace thought of that as he held his impossible family, his Lithari wife, his naturally joined daughter, the bonds that connected them to his mother and beyond. They were living proof that the Queen Mother had been right. Love was evolution's greatest tool, and it had given them everything. The sea sky sailed on through the night, carrying the future in a child's dreams and the past in kept promises. Behind them, Earth turned in its ancient dance. Ahead, the stars sang new songs of transformation and hope. They were going home, to Tamaris, to New Avalon, to wherever their family chose to make it stand. The joined were no longer an experiment, but a people, born from a rescue and a ring, nurtured by courage and choice. The universe was changing. They would greet it as a family, bound by more than blood or species or the habits of history. They were bound by the promise two mothers had made in a moment of crisis. A promise their grandchildren had fulfilled without knowing. A promise their great-grandchild would carry into whatever came next.
It had begun with a contract Jace hadn't fully read. A ring he'd thought was just technology. A marriage he'd believed was accidental. None of it had been accident. It had been love, playing the long game across generations, proving that connection was stronger than division, that family was bigger than species, that the future belonged to those brave enough to join hands across the void. "I love you," he whispered to his wife, his daughter, the family that surrounded them in bonds, visible and invisible. "We know," Seraphine whispered back, and in her voice he heard echoes of the Queen Mother's promise, his mother's dedication, their daughter's infinite potential. "We've always known." The stars continued their eternal dance. But now humanity and the Lithari danced together, teaching the universe new steps, and somewhere in quantum space, where consciousness left its echoes, a Queen Mother smiled to see her plan complete. Family had saved them all, just as she'd always known it would.